Well, that's just like your opinion, man. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 74 of Movies Are Awesome, the show all about world traveling. My name is Nathan Pottle, and thank you for joining me today. And, well, before I get into today's main topic today, there's something big and tragic that happened that I gotta talk about, and that is the passing of Chadwick Boseman. And that just kind of came out of nowhere. And it's been a really, really long time since I've been affected this deeply by the passing of a celebrity. Like, normally I don't feel that sad or broken up about it, but this one in particular, this one hurts, especially because he was making all of these movies while fighting cancer and just nobody knew about it. And so, like, that's the mark of a hero, and I really want to go and start watching some more of his other movies because I haven't seen that many of the stuff that he's been in. So I'm going to check out more of his movies, and I think you guys should too. Check out some of Chadwick Boseman's work. He's not just Black Panther, he's in a bunch of other movies. So try and find the time, go check those out, and my heart goes out to his family while they're going through this mourning process, and I'm sure a lot of people have been really supportive of all this because it's pretty rough. So I wanted to mention that really quickly before talking about other things. Before getting into the Tenet review, I have other reviews that I'm going to get ready for the next few weeks that I've been mentioning. I have already seen New Mutants. I watched it yesterday, so I'm going to be getting that review ready for next week's episode. But today I'm talking about Tenet. It's finally out. It's here. I got to go see it. I was very, very excited to go to the theater. Me and my wife went to go see it last week. I've had a lot of time to really sit and think about this movie before, like, talking about it. And there's lots to think about, and there's lots to say. So, as usual with my reviews, though, I'm going to start with non-spoilers first, and then for anyone who hasn't seen the movie, they can stop there, they can go see the movie, and then I'm going to talk about spoilers. There's lots to spoil in this movie. This is very plot-heavy and plot-driven, so I don't want to give things away for people who haven't seen the movie. I don't want to ruin that experience for them. So I will get started right now in the non-spoiler section. I'll just do kind of like a brief summary of what this movie is about. Our main character, played by John David Washington, I do not know the character's name. I actually don't really know any of the characters' names, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But John David Washington's character is trying to track down this arms dealer, and this arms dealer is making deals with people from the future in order to get inverted weapons. And what inversion is an item that travels backwards through time instead of forwards through time. And I'm going to talk about inversion a little bit more later in the review as well, but he's basically trying to find this arms dealer so that he can stop the use of this weaponry, because it's an end of the world type situation that he's trying to prevent. And he meets some people along the way. He teams up with Robert Pattinson and Elizabeth Debicki's character, who is the wife of the arms dealer, and they go on this time travel-y adventure, and it's real interesting. Now, with inversion, I'm not going to pretend how this works. The movie does take a little bit of time to explain it, but not really, and I just don't know. When it comes to shooting a gun, but the bullet is inverted, so the bullet is already in a wall, and it's coming out of the wall then into the gun. I'm not sure how that works, or how that is supposed to be like a more powerful weapon than shooting a regular gun, because either way, if you get shot with a bullet that goes forward or a bullet that goes backwards, I don't see, you're still getting shot. So really the point of it kind of escapes me. I'm not exactly sure why, but it sure does look cool. The inversion stuff looks really, really cool. And when I get into the spoiler section, I'm going to talk more about some specific instances where they use inversion that just kind of blows my mind. But also, it looks cool and we don't get any kind of explanation. So what I would say for people going into this movie who have not seen it is prepare to have no idea what's going on until about halfway or 2/3 through the movie. This movie just takes zero time explaining anything. But then once you get to the point where things start to get explained and it starts to make sense, then that payoff is there, but it takes a long time to get there. So if you're watching the movie, like, don't sit there trying to puzzle it out. Like, don't distract yourself from watching the movie by trying to figure out the movie. It will explain it to you. You just have to get deep enough into it. You have to do the legwork, and then you get to a very specific point in the movie where everything just kind of starts to be explained. And by everything being explained, I mean more the plot gets explained, not so much the inversion gets explained. I have no idea about the inversion, but I do understand the plot and exactly like how things play out in this movie. And so you just got to give the movie the time to explain it to you. And I'm sorry if my voice isn't sounding as normal today. I can feel like I got a little something in my throat here. It is earlier in the morning than I normally record, so maybe my voice is just groggy from having woken up, and I haven't really spoken much today until sitting down in front of the camera. So I think that's what's up with my voice today. So if it doesn't sound as crisp and clean as normal, that's why. I'm very sorry about that. I'm feeling it in my throat right now. Maybe I should pause and get some water, but I've got too much momentum build up. Let's just keep going here. As far as the cast goes, I really like the cast of this movie. John David Washington, I don't think I've seen him in anything else, but I really liked him in this movie. Robert Pattinson is continuing to prove that he is not just the guy from Twilight. He's very, very talented. Last year, he was in a movie called The Lighthouse, which I really liked, and his performance is outstanding. The movie's kind of weird, though, and a little bit out there, so like watch a trailer first before like going into the movie. It's also a little dark, so don't go into The Lighthouse blind. Know what you're getting into before watching it. But circling back, Robert Pattinson is a very talented actor. I'm very excited about him being Batman, and we're gonna see how that goes. Elizabeth Debicki is also very good in this movie. I've seen her in a few other things, and I like her every single time. She just seems very likable. You know, there's something about her. And then we have Kenneth Branagh. Now, Kenneth Branagh is just outstanding in this movie. Like he's scary and he's intimidating, and he is doing a Russian accent, but it doesn't sound goofy and weird. It feels very right and it feels very natural. So I think that my favorite performance out of this movie is either Robert Pattinson or Kenneth Branagh. I'd probably have to lean towards Kenneth Branagh, just because Robert Pattinson isn't in the movie as much as I would like him to be. So just because of that, I'd have to lean more towards Kenneth Branagh being the best performance out of this movie. And when you kind of find out more what's going on with him and what he's doing, it's just very interesting. It's a very dramatic introduction to his character and like how he comes into play. I liked it a whole lot. I'll move on though to talk a little bit about the visual effects of this movie. Now, this movie has less than 500 visual effects shots in it, which is absolutely crazy because it's a very visually stunning movie. A lot of the stuff was done in camera. Now, Christopher Nolan went to extreme lengths to use as little CGI as possible, and he succeeded. There is a scene in the trailer where they crash an airplane into a building, and I think I've mentioned this on the show before. But instead of faking the airplane crashing into the building, they actually bought an old airplane and crashed it into a building. It looks incredible. It looks so good. That airplane sequence is just really, really good. I liked it a lot. When I get into the spoiler section, I'll talk about it a little bit more in depth. But that scene specifically was really, it stuck in my mind, you know, like I'm still thinking about it. There's a couple of other scenes and sequences that also really stick in my mind, but that one specifically I'm thinking about a lot for very specific reasons that I'll get into in the spoiler section. The score for this movie I wasn't as into. It gave me really Interstellar vibes from the score, and I really didn't like the Interstellar score. I think it is too like loud and in your face, and sometimes the score is so loud you can't hear what people are saying. So I wasn't super into the score for this movie. There were aspects of it that I felt were really good, but overall, for the most part, I wasn't as into the score. and now at this point in the review, I'm kind of getting into more negatives, things that I didn't like so much without giving away spoilers, and then we'll move into the spoiler section right away. I don't have a ton of negatives for this movie. One of them being though is that we get like no character development. Like by the end of this movie, I don't know anything about any of these characters except for Elizabeth Debicki's character and Kenneth Branagh. But like our main character, John David Washington, I don't even remember his name. Like we get very little character introduction and like zero character development. Like there's no story arcs. This is all just plot and like trying to save the world. And I think part of the reason because of this is because there's so much plot. This movie moves really, really quickly. Like it just goes from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, and it doesn't stop to breathe. And so you're trying to keep up, but at the same time, the movie's not explaining to you what is going on or why this sequence of events is even really happening. And so you're feeling completely lost. And as you get deeper into the movie, it does give you that clarity. But sitting in the theater for an hour and a half, I am just feeling completely lost. And I think that a lot of people will hold that as a negative towards the film. And I hold it as a negative towards the film. Like, give me a little bit more than what you've been giving me, right? And because we don't have any kind of emotional attachment to any of these characters, why do I care what they're doing? Right? And that's why I feel that Inception is probably Christopher Nolan's crowning achievement. It's not my favorite of his movies, but it's probably the best of his movies because it has the high concept that Tenet is trying to do, but it also has the emotional impact, and we get into the characters' backstories and we understand their motivations. And it seems that John David Washington's character is just doing the stuff in this movie because he has to, or just because it's the right thing to do. Like, we don't have reasons for why this is happening. In Inception, Leonardo DiCaprio's character is performing Inception so he can go home and see his family and like be reunited with his kids. That like, and then there's like more with his wife and stuff like that. In this movie, we get nothing like that. There's no emotion tied to our main characters, at least for John David Washington and Robert Pattinson. And I wish there was. And now it is a 2.5 hour long movie, so it's pretty full of stuff already. But you know, this movie could have been 15 or 20 minutes longer, and I would have been fine with it if that meant I was getting more time with the characters and able to like bond with them more and connect with them more. So even though this movie's 2.5 hours, it moves so fast. We don't have time for any of the characters. It moves too fast for its own good. So that's probably my biggest negative about Tenet, is that there's no emotional connection for me to get invested in what's happening on screen, with the exception of Elizabeth Debicki's character. Like, she's the only one who like I'm able to empathize with and just understand where she's coming from and why she's doing things. Everyone else, we just don't get it. Looking at my notes here, I think that's going to be pretty much it for the non-spoiler section. So just to kind of wrap it up in non-spoilers, I do think this movie is very good. It's a technical achievement. It's worth watching, especially in theaters, as long as you guys are being safe and holding to all of the COVID regulations. Like, you don't have to worry or be scared about going out to the theater. As long as you're like sanitizing and washing your hands and wearing your mask and doing all this stuff, you're gonna be just fine. Just go support this movie. It did make $56 million its opening weekend, which is way higher than what they were expecting. They were expecting about 30 million. So that's really encouraging to me that people are going out to watch the movies. That means we're gonna get more movies to go see, and we're slowly going to get back to a place where movies can come out regularly and we can go see them, and it gives us something to do at like outside of the house, right? So let's continue supporting movies so that we can get back to what we love, which is sitting in the theater and enjoying a brand new film. Just as long as you're aware going into Tenet that you're going to be confused for the first chunk of this movie, and then it's going to explain things. So like, just know that going in, and you're going to be just fine. You're probably going to enjoy this movie. If you liked Christopher Nolan's other films, you're probably going to be on board with this one too. So Tenet is a good movie and I like it. Now let's talk about spoilers. First off, for spoilers, right off the bat, I want to say that John David Washington recruiting himself from the future is something that was like 100% predictable, and it was for sure him, and you saw it coming from a mile away. There's just no other way about this. Now, in the regular section, we were talking about, and also, by the way, I'm going to talk about the spoiler section as if you've already seen the movie, so I'm not going to explain things. I'm just going to talk about specific scenes, and I'm going to assume that you know what I'm talking about. So, when we get to the scene when we're in the red and blue room, and Kenneth Branagh has his wife, and he shoots her, and then he goes into the room, and then he's moving backwards, and everyone else is moving forwards, and then they're moving backwards, and he's moving forwards, and we get to see this whole like time travel play out and exactly how it works. This is where the movie starts to make sense for me. This is where I understand, because before it seems like it's just objects being sent back in time, but now I can see that people can travel through time as well. Which leads me to the biggest question that I have about this movie is, do you need to be inverted to go back in time? And if you don't, why does it matter? I don't think you need to be inverted to go back in time, because we had like 2 Kenneth Branaghs and 2 of the wives like on the boat at the end of the movie, and they're both moving forward in time. Like, they're not seeing each other move backwards. It seems like you definitely don't need to be inverted to move back in time. So then what is the point of inverting objects? Other than if you have something inverted and something moving regularly through time, like at the same time, it tears the fabric of reality apart and then it like ends everything. That's the only practical application that I can see for using inversion, is to end all of existence. Because, like I said in the other section, if you get shot with a bullet, if it's moving forwards or moving backwards, like, it doesn't matter. You're still being shot. Like, you're like, it's still a bullet going through you. I don't understand. Well, I guess on some level, like, if you shoot a bullet forward, it can get stuck in someone. But if you invert a bullet, it has to end up back in that gun, so it's gonna go completely through you. Maybe that makes a difference. And then they said something about radiation, but, you know, being shot's being shot. I don't know. But with the inversion, I really liked when we went back and we had the sequence with the airplane twice, and we saw it like going forwards and then going backwards, and John David Washington was fighting himself, and seeing that scene play out in like a forward sense from his character's perspective was really, really cool. It kind of brought everything full circle for that scene, because going out of that airplane sequence, I was like, what just happened here with this guy moving backwards, and he like slid under the doorway and got away. It like really, really was interesting. But then when they go back in time and they go back to that night, it makes 100% sense. I can understand it a whole lot more. It definitely makes me want to go back and watch the movie again, so that I can see it with fresh eyes, knowing what's going to happen later in the film, and I'm probably going to have a greater understanding. I think this movie really demands multiple viewings, just the way that it's layered and laid out, that watching it a second time, knowing everything that happens, I think that's going to be hugely beneficial to the movie watching experience. So I think I need to see this movie a second time. One thing that I really liked with the inversion, though, is at the very end of the film, where we have soldiers moving forwards and soldiers moving backwards in time, and they explode that tower. And so they explode the bottom of the tower, and the other guys explode the top of the tower, and they're watching it come together at the bottom, and the other guys are watching it come together at the top, and then they explode the other way. That was a very cool sequence of events, and watching it play out was just spectacular. Now, one thing I forgot to mention in the non-spoiler section is I thought that this movie would have a lot more IMAX footage than it did, especially because Dunkirk was shot almost all on IMAX, and we had just a little bit of other aspect ratios. But maybe it's just because I didn't watch this movie on an IMAX screen. Maybe we see different cuts or different aspect ratios. It did change aspect ratios a few times during the film. I just expected it to be a lot more, because scenes like that, we would have benefited even more from seeing it like on an IMAX camera as opposed to whatever other cameras they were using. I don't claim to know all the cameras that they used on set, but IMAX cameras were for sure used because Christopher Nolan loves them. And then, like I said before, with the characters, I think we didn't get any kind of backstory or emotional tie into these characters as to so that we get the reveal at the end, like, oh, it was him from the future the whole time. Oh, Robert Pattinson had known John David Washington the whole time. That's all fine and good. I'm not super into it though because I want that emotional connection as opposed to that reveal. It doesn't have the same kind of payoff that an emotional connection to the character would have had for me. Also, we don't even really get an introduction to Robert Pattinson. Like we don't see their characters meet. Just all of a sudden they're in a scene together and now they're hanging out, and we don't get to see them meet for the first time. I would have really liked that. Or like I guess have them meet for the first time from John David Washington's perspective, because for Robert Pattinson he had already met him in the future. So I don't know. I would have liked it. Just give me a little bit more of something like that, right? And I think Christopher Nolan gets a lot of flack for not having as much emotion in his movies, and I think that's why when it comes to Interstellar, he really cranked it the other way. And I've never seen so much crying in a science fiction film. Like there's so much emotion poured into that movie, and like it didn't help it. It's like Interstellar is still a bad movie. But because I brought up Interstellar, I think that this movie is connected to Interstellar. It takes place in the same world for a few different reasons. I've got like 3 or 4 reasons why this movie is connected to Interstellar. Here's my theory right here. So in Interstellar, the musical score is so loud we can't hear people talking. That happens in this movie too. In a scene in the movie Tenet, they talk about the people in the future have no resources and their planet is dying, so they're going back in time to either fix things or kill everybody as like a revenge plot or whatever. So in Interstellar, they have no resources and they have to go to space to like find a new world to live in because like past generations have ruined the planet. So that's another connection right there. I had another one and I can't even remember what it was. Oh, time stuff. There's weird time stuff going on in Interstellar. There's weird time stuff going on in Tenet. So that kind of lines up. I'm 100% convinced. It's got to be tied into Interstellar. I was hoping it would be tied into Inception because I would prefer that because Inception is way better than Interstellar. But if that's what he wants to connect it to, that's what it is what it is, right? So those are my theories on that. I actually don't have a lot of spoiler stuff to talk about. Kenneth Branagh, though, oh my goodness, he's really scary. And he was gonna, like, when he comes in to talk to his wife after she pushed him off the boat, and he, like, starts taking his belt off and putting his cufflinks through the holes of the belt, and he's, like, gonna beat her. Oh my goodness, I was terrified that we were about to like watch her get brutally, maliciously beat, but then thankfully she weaseled her way out of it. Like she saved herself because of people like knocking on the door, and her logic saved her from being beat. Thankfully, I would have been really agitated watching that. Like I have a lot of trouble watching that kind of thing. But then like that just goes to show how good of a performance Kenneth Branagh gives, and the terror that he instills in not only his wife but he instills in the audience. Like I was edge of my seat like when he goes off and he's on a rampage. Like he's a very terrifying man. It's crazy. And then also we get the reveal that he has cancer and he's gonna die, so if he can't live in the world, nobody can, so he's gonna destroy everything. That motivation was fine. It was all right. It doesn't 100% make sense to me, but in his character's mind, it doesn't make sense. So I'm gonna find a way to be okay with it. I don't hate this movie. I quite enjoyed this movie a lot. There are just things that I would have liked more of or developed a little bit further. Just give me a little bit more. You know, that's what I would like out of this movie. I think that's pretty much it here. Looking at my notes, I've covered everything that I wrote down that I wanted to talk about, and then some. There were things that popped into my head that I remembered afterwards. So I'm going to wrap things up here. Tenet is a good movie. I recommend going to see it. And if you do see Tenet, I would love for you to tell me what your thoughts on the movie were. You can do that by reaching out to me. You can find me on Twitter at PottleNathan and on Instagram at Movies Are Awesome Podcast. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I'm so happy to be doing reviews again. It's very exciting. If you haven't done so already, please feel free to subscribe to the show. You can do that on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and a whole bunch of other places. Stay tuned for next week where I've got the New Mutants review that's going to be up and ready to go. And as always, if you have nothing else to do, go watch more movies.